Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
I'm going to kick this podcast off by paying my respects and acknowledging the Cubby peoples whose land where this vodcast, is being recorded from here on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. I'd also like to acknowledge their elders, past and present, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We have never ceded our sovereignty as First Nations peoples living in this country, now known as Australia. And as always, acknowledging country is continuing an ancient diplomatic tradition that dates back tens of thousands of years in this country. So for non-Indigenous Australians that are watching or listening, see the acknowledgement of country as an opportunity or even as an invitation for you to participate in the oldest living continuous culture in world history. So in saying that, I would now like to introduce my guest today. And Art, you have been part of my life from afar. Now you're in Sydney. But even as a young girl, I still remember seeing you on stage at Woodford Festival singing Run, Rita, Ruby,
Run,
Rosie. In my head, Daisy. Run, Daisy, run. And that's the first time, and I might have been about 11 years of age. That's, not that old, but it was quite a long time ago. So I remember you as a singer on stage, and then I was introduced to you more as a young teenager through my mother and my grandmother, the late Maureen Watson, as well as my dad. But it was actually the women in my life that were, I would say, more connected to you or had something to do with you. And it was my mum and my grandmother that I remember yarning about you and talking about how deadly you were. So it's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you as my guest today on the Black Magic Woman podcast.
Thank you for having me. And as another Murri woman, I also want to acknowledge the country that you sit on and the country that I sit on and rest and create. And that is the Cattigal down here in Sydney. And I'm, as you've said, my name is Leah Purcell and I'm a Goa-Gunggari-Wakka Wakka Murri woman. And thank you for having me on Black Magic Woman podcast.
Oh, let's create the magic. I was just going to say, Aunt, with all of my guests, I always ask them to introduce themselves. And I think it's an amazing way for you to talk about or share with us what you want to share. And at the end, I'm going to wrap up with your bio, which is a couple of pages long. But can you tell our listeners, you did already say a bit about your people, your mob, but for people, especially those that are not familiar with Queensland or Murri people and Murri country, we've got listeners now all around the world. Can you share with us who your people are, where you grew up, and just a little bit more about yourself?
Yep. So my bloodline to country in the nations that I just ran off there is up in Goa, Koa, up in Winton. That's near Longreach, that's central north. And then you come down that centre line to my grandmother's country, which is my mother's mother, and that's Gunggari, so that's out near Mitchell and Roma. And then Wakka Wakka is my spiritual place of birth. We've got historical connection to that country for over 100 years because that's where my grandmother, she was stolen from Mitchell and placed in Cherbourg in 1910. And my grandfather came to Cherbourg to live with his mother's sister. And they met and married, and they had 7 daughters out there on Cherbourg. They lived in Broadway Street, 4th house on the right, up from the roundabout. And when my mother was 15, my grandfather got a job with some white people in the township of Murgon, and they left the settlement and they were living out on properties. So I grew up in town. I'm the youngest of 7 brothers and sisters, 5 girls, 2 boys, and my dad is a white fella, but he wasn't present in my life. So it was just me and my mum. He had a little bit more to do with the older ones, but he was married to a white woman and had children with her, but he had 6 to my mum. So my mum's my hero, my mother, my father. She gave a lot of time to her mother, looked after her. She was bedridden for 27 years with arthritis and Parkinson's disease. Then she looked after her grandfather, and unfortunately not long when I turned 18. I turned 18 in August. I had my daughter in September, and my mother passed away in October. So unfortunately, when her life was just beginning, it was taken from her. But her death had set me free. So I reckon that's the greatest gift she could give me, to get me out of the situation. Being the youngest, you got that responsibility to stay there. But I was in an abusive relationship, and I had to get out. And I often say that her gift to me was her passing. So I couldn't go on in life without busting myself to do right by that woman, So and my grandmother, because she was from that generation where they had no voice. On her papers, when they moved to Bramber, they were all considered subhuman. Like, what is that? So I do what I do for my mother and my grandmother, because they went through the hard times. And yes, there's hard times today, but we're living in a world where we can make a change and make a difference. And that's just my motto. So I'm out there having a crack.
I absolutely connected with. It's interesting because I've never ever heard you speak about. I've heard you speak about your mother, but I didn't know that she passed when you were 18, and my mother passed in August, 2 months after my 18th birthday.
Oh, wow.
She was on holidays back in Redfern, because we live in Brisbane then, on holidays back in Redfern, and had a heart attack on the block at the age of 45. And I talk about it every single day because I'm delivering training, and when we talk about closing the gap and statistics around life expectancy, I share with people my own lived experience and our family history. So straight away, when you said August 18, I just started to think, hold a minute, there's something here that I connect with instantly. And when you said it set you free, with your mum passing, with my mum passing, it felt like we had to grow up a little bit more quicker now to help my dad, who had our grandmother living with us, but also to help my older sisters raise their children. But when I look back at that now, Art, I feel like it was an honour, for Dad to see me as the most capable at the age of 18, to step up and look after 4 younger children. And now when I look back at those young children and them growing up and them raising their children, just how as black fellas we drop everything to make sure that our family and our children, that we can keep them and look after them. So thank you for sharing that with us. And what about your husband? And you got a daughter?
Yes. Well, my daughter, she's 33, and I've got 2 wonderful grandsons from her. They're 14 and 11. And, as family, we all live together in the one house. So, this house, we need a new house. So, but we're family and we wouldn't want it any other way. My partner and husband and poor fella, been with me for 30 years, Bain Stewart. He's a Nunakal Nugu Gurrumpul man from Stradbroke Island. So his mother's from over there, and his dad is he always says it, a coal miner from Cessnock, all that, the white side of his family are up that way. And I think me and Bain sort of, we sort of is it the yin and the yang of each other? It's funny because he grew up with his white dad more because his mum moved away to Melbourne, and I grew up with my black mum and had not much to do with my white dad. So when we got together, I loved sitting yarning to his dad because I go, oh, this is what it looks like to have a white dad, and then his mum. And I'd talk about my family, and then his mum come up and lived with us. So, once again, just opening that door to family, and that's important that we're all together and supporting one another. But Bain, back in his early days, was into martial arts, and he ran the first Indigenous martial arts centre in Queensland at West End there, and worked over at Dundallee at the boys, what do you call it those days? It wasn't.
Yep, the youth service.
Yeah, youth
yep.
service.
Hostel kind of thing.
The hostel, yep. So, and then boys would come and train with him and work in the gym. So, we were always fostering, everyone would call him Uncle or Auntie Leah, and, we had our hands there and a few of them raising them up, or they'd go on, I'll send you to Uncle Bain. And they'd come and stay with us. But yeah, so he had a big connection with them, all them young fellas there. And then we sort of picked up, and of course I was interested in performing. And one day we were sort of about 3 months into our relationship, and typical blackfellow way. So we met by a blind date because my cousin worked for his cousin. And I went to get a job off his cousin, and she said, "Hey, you don't want to be a secretary, you want to be an actor?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "Are you any good?" And I said, "Oh, I think so." And she said, "Well, I'm not going to squash your dream." She said, "But I can get you a good man." I said, "Oh, no, I'm right. I just finished with a long relationship. I'm good." But we eventually picked up. And then 3 months into our relationship, I was over at his place, and I was, you get comfortable, and I'm there singing in the shower, and he come and he said, "Gee, you got a good voice." And I said, "I'll knock it off, I'm already sleeping with you." So he reckon, "No, I'm serious."
They're trying to kid you up.
Yeah, and he said, "No, I'm serious. You're talented." And then he went for a jog, and this is true. He was cruising up around Musgrave Park there, coming past Jagger Arts, and in the gutter was a yellow piece of paper, but it was flipped over, and he stopped for some reason and picked it up, and there was a Murray music workshop. And there was Uncle Headley, Gary Cooch, and they're my relations, There was Uncle... all their names are good out of my head. Uncle Angus Rabbit was there. Uncle Robin O'Chin, legends in our community. Yep. For music, and I said, "Oh, I know all them mob, that's my family, go on, they'll run amok, And I said, and then Bain said, no, you should go." And I went, and it was the best thing that I could have done, because of course I was with uncles, and you felt empowered, and you didn't feel silly to ask questions, you didn't feel dumb, if there might have been Migloo mob around, and I would drive them crazy because I just wouldn't move from the mic. They go, "Leah, can you give us a break? We want to go for a smoke, go and a cup of tea," and I'd say, "You can go, I'm just waiting," and through that,
I'll be here.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Go on, you can go. And I said, and through that got, I had the experience of working with a band. We made the little cassette of Sharing the Load. I wrote my first song, and and being back up and helping. So having that Murray start, into my career made me feel strong. And if I can finish with, on that little note there, then your grandmother, Auntie Maureen, wrote Through Murray Eyes about stories about Musgrave Park. Auntie Kathy Fisher directed it, and it was the first sort of theatre where it was majority blackfella cast, and there's only 2 white fellas, I'm pretty sure, that was in it. And it was our production, and we did it at Jagger Arts there on the lawn. And once again, having that Murray start, working with Auntie Kathy, she worked me hard, mate. I had to go back 3 times. I said, "Yeah, Aunt, we're related. Come on now." And and she said, "You want to be in this industry, you work hard," and I'm grateful for that. She taught us how to dance. Before we'd go for lunch, she'd make us. We were digging holes, mate, there in Jagera before we got that step right. So, but it was really, I think it was really important, and I felt privileged to have that Murray start in my industry, because I wasn't afraid to ask questions I might have if I was just thrown into whitefella mainstream, And
I was just going to say, in terms of, that groundedness and being grounded in culture and around people like Gran, who was just amazing with her knowledge, her wisdom, her life experience, she'd been around the world. I don't know how many stamps that she had in her passport, I didn't even know what a passport was back in them days, but Gran, she was never home, always gone. But in terms of the storytelling, Gran was an amazing storyteller, and she was, known all around the world. And I'll always remember, in terms of Murray Eyes, I didn't know about Murray Eyes or Through Murray Eyes, but I'm now going straight to the Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson. I can't help it, because when I watched the movie, you said there's a bit of a poem there about black is, like the colour of my skin. Well, Gran wrote a poem, Black is. And I remember as a little girl in Redfern, we had T-shirts. Gran used to make us T-shirts, screen printed. And she'd had black is, the colour of my skin. She used to have different things, but red, yellow, black. She used to have, I remember New York, London, Paris, Redfern, like all these different T-shirts growing up, and I reckon that was her way of making sure that we knew who we were and we knew where we came from. And I just thought of that when I watched the film a couple of weeks ago. There was a poem there. Is that a poem that you wrote?
No, that's the song that's sung in that the character mumbles with the she hums it. I'm trying not to give too much away, but she hums it. So the little boy sings it, the mother hums it, but that's an actual Irish lament. So that one was and I was inspired by Nina Simone does a version. But the poem you're talking about from your grandmother, Uncle Hedley Johnson, put music to that. And back in the day I used to, but I didn't realise Auntie Maureen had written that. I've actually, I only, on my music books here, I should read to see if he put her name on it. But he put music to it. And I was going to break out into it, but I got that other song in my head. And I used to sing that with my band. Yeah, black is the colour of my true love's hair. Black is the colour of my skin. So that would be, that might be your grandmother's poem.
There you go. That straight away resonated with me. And I've already basically said about The Drover's Wife, and it is actually in cinemas now. Yes. I do want to talk about the film because I'm so excited every time us blackfellas see a movie at the cinema, right? We get really excited for our mob because most of the films will never make it into the cinema, and I would say, maybe it's too much or too full on, but I would probably put it down to finances, resources and budget. So there's the book there, the Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson, and now there's the film that Roadshow Village has backed. You star in it, you wrote it, produced it, directed it, Uncle Bane. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about how this film came to be, because I know that there's a whole story behind it.
Yeah, and I got some little show and tells here for you too. So when I was little,
look at.
Yes, when I was little, my mum would tell me, I was a mongrel sleeper, I was a terrible sleeper, and I slept with her, and I'd always say, Mum, tell me that story about that little girl little boy and his mother. And what I was referring to was, this is Henry Lawson's short story, and it's 15 short stories, and The Drover's Wife was one of them. So my mum would read it to me, and I know that I was 5 years old because on this page I wrote Dick, Dora, Nip and Fluff, and that was from your grade 1 readers. So that was a great record of that. And this is the article. That's a picture from The Drover's Wife. That's out of the book. And the reason I reckon I connected to this story was I was 5 years old and I started to use my imagination, and I put myself in that story, that I was that little boy. I was my mother's protector, as I said before, there was no man around, so I was her protector. And then she was the mother, she was the father, and the drover's wife was left alone. So her husband would go droving and leave her alone, and she'd have to fight off, rogue swagmen, men rocking up at her place, the beasts, wild animals, wild dogs. And in this case, in this story, was a snake. And I think, we lived on the last street in Murgon. We had a combustion stove, so we had a wood heap. My mother taught me to split a log for firewood. She taught me to stack a wood heap, and she would say, don't stack it whole or a snake would get under. And so those things recalled me back to that story. So then I carried that story with me for 47 years. This little book was the one thing that I went back into that house to grab when my mother died. That's the one thing I took. And at that time I wasn't going, one day I'm going to make a movie. I was in a violent relationship. I had my daughter on my hip. I had 3 bags in the car, and I had that book, and I was just worried about where I was going to get a feed and a bed that night and the next day. So, jumped down to 2006, and I was doing the film Jindabyne, up in Jindabyne with the director Ray Lawrence, and I went out on country and on my days off and fell in love with the landscape. And I said, we don't utilise it enough in our film and television. So anyway, me and Bane went out to Mount Kosciuszko, and you take it all in, and then I just had this urge, and I yelled out, I'm coming back, and I think I'm going to do something. and I think it's going to be the drover's wife, and I'm going to be in it, echoed around the mountains. And then, cut to 2019, and I'm on the opposite range calling action and cut. So you got to be careful what you put out there, because dreams, wishes do come true. And I guess, but where it all actually started was I was a frustrated director in a writer's workshop, and all these writers were, they had money thrown at them, and actors and dramaturgs and directors, and they were still churning out that same 12 pages. And I said, Leah, don't take it out on them. Go home and write your own. You might have that urge to write again. So I did. I pulled that little book off the shelf. That red folder was sticking out, and I said, well, maybe it's time for you. Sat it beside my computer. I didn't reread it because I wanted to use the recall of what my mother told me and what I remembered, and I sat down and wrote in 7 days the first draft, or I call it a spew. It's just everything just comes out, ideas, and away I went. 5 days for Act 1, 2 days for Act 2, and then I handed it in for the Belknave's Fellowship at Belvoir Street Theatre in Sydney, and I only had to do 15 pages, and this is true. I got a little late. Don't forget to hand in your scripts for the Belknave things. And I said, final notice. And I said, I never got the first one because I thought you had to be a new writer. But it was for anyone. If you were as long as you were mob, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, you could apply for it. So this was, true as God, this was 3:30. And I rung Bain, and he said, what do you want? I said, what are you doing? He said, no, well, what do you want? And I said, well, at 5 o'clock is the deadline for the Belknave's Fellowship. You've got 2 hours to do an application. And he went, true. And I said, well, I've got the 15 pages, you do the application. So away he went, and 1 minute to 5 he pressed that send button and said it's gone. And then, my only note back was what happens next. So we won that fellowship, and it allowed me to write with some finance to help, because my acting gigs are how we pay the rent and buy the bread and milk and, give money out to mob. And so to sit down with a bit of finance and a script editors, it allowed me to come up with The Drover's Wife, the play. And this play went on to win major awards, like it won Book of the Year, which is unheard of. A play had never won it. And also we sold out in 4 days. We only did 33 shows. We've only done one season of it there. But within that time, Bain amazingly got all the people that finance film in Sydney to come along and see the show, and they loved it. They had a first draft placed in, and then he sort of looked across at them. It was our 5th encore, standing ovation. It was crazy. And the boys said, what have you done, Leah? I said, I don't know, just take the bow. I said, I was just bored and I wanted to write something. And they said, Leah, we'd love you to, continue on and develop the film out of that. So that's kind of how it all sort of work together, and it opened in Australia nationally. It's going to open in the UK, and America's not too far behind. We've got a meeting with the distributors over there next week to work out when that's coming out. So it's like pinch me moment, I've just come. I was a little girl from a single.
It's all happening.
Yeah, but my mother was on a single parent pension. We didn't have anything. I got most of my new clothes out of a plastic bag from families, and we did it tough when we came to Sydney, Bain was working doors, and, I was doing what you had to do, and here we are, a film, nationally. Big name, but still no blankets.
Isn't it famous CD title there, Warumpi Band, eh?
Yeah, big name, no blankets. We're still the same. Oh, don't.
And Leah, in terms of, I would say, the incredible success that you've had over, 30 years at least that you've been writing, acting, singing, very long time. A lot of people don't realise, or maybe in the arts they do, that, success doesn't usually happen overnight. It's a long, hard slog. But I just want to say this, and I'm going to be very straight up now. I would say that if you was a white Australian woman, that people would know who you are. And you probably would have rose to fame on a whole nother level if you was a white Australian woman. And I really do, that's my own opinion. But as a black woman, and someone who's not afraid of telling the truth and telling it how it is, that it's kind of taken a lot longer for you to kind of be even recognised. And, you know, I was very honoured to be part of your Australian film Walk of Fame, the gold star there outside the Ritz Cinema in Randwick. And it was that moment where you were being acknowledged from your industry that, just in my own opinion, I was thinking it was long overdue.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, you are absolutely spot on, I think. And it was because, yes, I'm fair-skinned, but my tongue and my soul is black, and with that black tongue, I'd be a truth teller from way back, and they were confused as to where to put me. You know, I got my first role in Police Rescue, and that wasn't any race. She was just a character. But then I got vocal through all the movements that we did. Like we had there was a big movement for native title when that started, because I did a lot of stuff with Annie Logie O'Donoghue, Noel Pearson, Aidan Ridgway. There was All Us Mob, and I'd just do the singing. I'd sing that song Run Daisy Run, and we went around. So I was big, and in those days, no cameras, no Facebook, no social media, so no one sort of knew that we were on the ground trying to reassure Australia that their Hills hoists weren't going to be taken. So because of my activism, the industry wasn't quite sure where to put me, and that's why I started advocating my own roles, or when people, like back in the 96 on Fallen Angels, that was an Indigenous role, and I was doing consultancy work on there and wasn't getting paid for it or acknowledged for it, but I said, you fellas don't know this woman, you know. So I was adding to the script and helping with the other mob that would come in. Good on them for having a go and crack. But then that's when I realised that I could be doing this, and I could be writing the best roles for me and for other mobs. So, yeah, you know, I think you're right. A few people else have said, or if you're in America, Leah, you know, the industry is fickle, you know, it's small. We still have that thing in Australia, the tall poppy syndrome, and I've got that from both sides, black and white, you know, of, you know, the old crabs in the bucket pulling you down just in case, you know, where people says, oh, you want to do everything, and I go, well, yeah, well, why not? If you got the skill and you got the talent, then would you tell Jonathan Thurston to play half a game because he's too deadly? Would you tell Kathy Freeman to not run so fast because you're too good, sis, you know? So why can't we be as deadly as we need to be? And because I know that I've done a lot for my community, you know, I've done a lot for young people around this country, and they appreciate it, and they know, because they call me mama, you know, and I never ever have done anything selfish, you know. It's all for me. Where I've given back, I've done it tenfold, and all those young people that I've worked with know. Like AACTA was a great example of nearly over 200 children, young people come through there, and we had the biggest success of, you know, the outcomes of mob going into avenues within the industry, which I'm very, very proud of. Or if they didn't go into the industry, they had that confidence to get work and go forward, and you know, and or even just to be in someone's space at a time where they might have needed someone to give them a hug or give them a pep up, or, you know, show them that there is a life out there if you work hard to make a go for it. And me and Bane have worked extremely hard, you know. We've jumped through windows, we went through back doors, we've tackled people on the street to tell them an idea, you know, and people go, oh, they can talk, them too. But, you know, that's the industry. You got to sell your idea. You got to back yourself. And if you don't back yourself, then who does? If he didn't believe in my talent, we wouldn't be here, you know. And I've always said to people, you've got to be proactive. My mother used to say to me, oh, you make me wild, Leah. You've always got a plan. I always had a plan when I was a kid. If one thing didn't work, Leah always had a plan for another. You're always planning.
Always one step ahead, couple of steps ahead. And I was going to say, so it really, when I look at you and Uncle Bane, it really is a team effort, right? A partnership to be able to get the film, you know, to be open now in cinemas across Australia. So Uncle Bane, so you star in it as Molly.
Yep.
And you produce it and direct it. And Uncle Bane, was also directing, yeah?
No, producer. So he was the lead producer. So he
was the
one
lead
that went out.
producer.
Yeah. So I get the ideas and he goes and sells them. So he worked, we did a co-production with Bunya Productions because this is our first time, so we're inexperienced in that. But Bain was at the forefront when we had to sit down and have all those conversations with philanthropic people that wanted to invest, or, he was leading that charge of talking up who I was, talking up the story, and he's a great talker and he's a great believer in it. So he's talked, and he's still, and he's exhausted right now, because he's talking to America, he's talking to the UK because we're yet to come out over there. He's trying to get as much promotion out of the film so that people support it and go see it in cinemas, because we've got to pay back all the money to others before we even see a cent of it, you know what I mean? So it's big name, no blanket still. Yeah. And he's just working, he's such a good businessman as well, in the sense of he knows when to push, he knows when to step back. He's brilliant in how he puts everything together, and his packaging. The biggest compliment that fellow got was when we were in America and someone said, "This is the best packaging I've ever received." And they were a very well-known person I don't know if it was Warner Brothers or one of them mob, they went, "Wow, this is amazing." So that was real validation for him and what he does, and he's a Virgo, so he's very precise. And then one other of our investors, who passed away now, bless him, and he was a great mentor. That was Neil Balnaves, a great mentor for Bain, and Bain could pick the phone up and ask questions, and Neil was there to answer everything. And Neil said some amazing things. He said, "Bain, you're spot on in how you do business in this industry, and you too will go a long way," And he we basically fell into it. He did, managing me by mistake, because I couldn't get an agent. And I had a book deal, I had a play, I just finished Police Rescue Fallen Angels, but their quota for Indigenous people was full and they didn't want anyone else. So he had to step in and start managing me. He used to manage boxers, and he said them boxers and fighters, kickboxers, they were easy compared to you, Leah.
Well, it would be hard. I could not even imagine. And I just, in terms of the film and, philanthropy, I was on a workshop yesterday with a deadly brother there in WA or Noongar country named Reese. A big shout out to you, my brother, who did a session called Acknowledge This for a lot of the executives from Philanthropy Australia, and I've just taken a position on Philanthropy Australia's RAP advisory group, which is pretty deadly. And just doing that session and listen to another brother talk about his country and doing that kind of cultural awareness, cultural education piece, which I do at Black Card. So I was there for two reasons. Philanthropy Australia invited me, and second reason is that I wanted to, meet the brother, heard of the brother, and for my own self-development and cultural development, professional development. But I spoke about at the end really quickly, thought I'd get a word in, and I said to everybody, I said, The Drover's Wife is out tomorrow in cinemas around the country. Go out and see it. I said, big shout out to the philanthropic sector for making this film possible. There's many players that made this film possible. I heard Art with a live Q&A in Sydney, the big premiere, and you mentioned Balnaves, and I just want to let the sector know, the people sitting in that Zoom session, I wanted them to know that, the fact that philanthropic funding goes to about 5% of Indigenous charities across the country, only 5% of that money. And I really wanted to highlight to them right then and there, first of all, kind of pat on the back, deadly, that philanthropy and philanthropic funding has contributed towards this film, but the need for their money to be invested into our communities, not just, there's suicide prevention, there's unemployment, there's, incarceration rates, there's domestic violence. There are a whole lot of services and organisations in our communities that need philanthropic funding.
Yes.
But I never thought about philanthropic funding for the arts. And this is really important, that this money, that they look beyond our community organisations that need that funding, but also to make sure that they don't leave the arts behind. And there's a lot of money that's, invested in non-Indigenous kind of communities and film and the arts. But if we're really going to, when we think about the history in this country, if we're going to get to a place of reconciliation, in terms of moving forward, it's not a term that I like to use, how do we move forward? What I always talk about it is how do we acknowledge how did we get to the place that we're in today? How did Aboriginal people arrive here? Or why are Aboriginal people in the position that we're in today? Why are we dying at the rates that we're dying? My mum at 45, her sister at 30. I know in Wilkenya, the life expectancy for an Aboriginal man is 39. And that's an Aboriginal community in New South Wales. Why are we the most incarcerated people on the planet? Why are our children still being removed at such high rates from our families and our communities? So there's all of these, kind of competing issues, I would say, or challenges in our community. But the arts and theatre, and I only know recently because I've joined the board with the Queensland Theatre Company, how important the arts is as a vehicle, as a mechanism for all Australians to hear stories, especially The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson, and to connect with it and hopefully, to start having conversations that need to be had, especially around domestic violence, which is a huge issue in this country. I don't want to give too much away from the film, but I want to say that I hope people go out and see it, because it's a film that needs to be seen and needs to be watched, and we need to start having these conversations, especially if your organisation has a reconciliation action plan. Yes. If you've got a RAP and you've got deliverables in that RAP for your people to educate themselves or to be exposed or immersed in Aboriginal culture, this is a film that's going to start those conversations. And the theme this year for Reconciliation Week, it's Be Brave, Start Change, something like that. And the NAIDOC theme is Get Up, Stand Up, Show Up. So I just think that this film is coming out at such a good time, especially when I think about NAIDOC Week and NRW Week. For a lot of the corporates that might be watching this podcast, if you're thinking about something that you can do with your peoples, well, reach out to Black Card and hopefully we could put on a private screening, or go out and buy a couple of 100 tickets and gift those tickets to your employees, or gift it to your clients, or even the Indigenous businesses that you're working with and hopefully are continuing to work with into the future. And in terms of Umbara Productions, I know that you've got a joint venture with Taxi Films. Did you want to share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, well, hopefully in the future, near future, well, we're actually right now we are working on a few Queensland projects. So it was an opportunity to come home and connect in and have a base there, but also work with mob and their stories. So there was, through the Screen Queensland, there was the First Draft First Nations initiative for scripting, and I think there was about 6. There was quite a few, and we have to, narrow it down to 6, and 3 out of the 6 have been constantly coming back to me and asking for advice. So I said to them they have to be proactive in what they do, and hopefully, if not with us, or at least with someone that we can steer them in the right direction to get their work made. So that's exciting, and hopefully we'll have a few more initiatives to come as we just had to get through the Drover's Wife launch day, and once we're out around the world we can then focus in and hone in. But it was interesting, I've sort of now that Molly Johnson is riding on her horse out there in the public in Australia, it's been interesting because my head's been going, oh, what's your next one, Leah? And I think I've got a story, and it is Queensland based, but that's all I'll say for now. But you know what I mean? So it's about coming home. It's about helping to employ, not what the big thing we need in our industry is. I know a lot of mob want to be in front of the camera or director or writer, but we really need technicians. We need sound. We need, camera. We need wardrobe. We need makeup. That's and we get lots of phone calls from people going, we'd love to have an Indigenous attachment to the technical side of things, working in electrics, working in props, So I'd encourage, and what we will do is look at initiatives like that where we encourage that side of things as well, because they're great jobs. You get to be on set. They're great opportunities. It's hard work. You got to start at the bottom of the ruck and work your way up. But I think that's good. My aunt always said, well, that's your initiation now in life. We don't have ceremony anymore, but getting work and working your way up through up the ladder is part of your process of growth. You take the good with the bad. So when she said, because I was there crying to her about something, and she said, well, look at it as initiation, Leah. You're wearing your scars on the inside now, and that's life. You got to take the good with the bad. So that's what we hope to do with Umbara and Taxi in Queensland. And we are working very closely with 3 projects that hopefully see the day of light of day soon in some sort of form of production. Yeah.
I've heard there's a Netflix series coming.
Well,
was I not meant to give that one away?
No, you can. But whether it's with Netflix, we're not sure. But what it is was we hope either to get a streamer or a broadcaster on board. But it's sort of the next stage of The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson, and it's going to be a premium limited TV series. So that means it's sort of like a 1 season. But look, I've got stories to cover 3 seasons if people love it that much. But it's a limited TV series, so it's 8 episodes, and where it's set is in 2020. And when you go see the film, there's a little girl in the film, and that's Molly's daughter Delphi. And in the TV series, it's Delphi's great-great-great-great-granddaughter, who was in 2020. An incident happens, and she's got to go back up into the snowy mountains. And while she's up there, her family's history presents itself, and she learns about history and connecting all the dots. And whilst she's up there, it's about her finding her voice and placing herself. So the tagline is, her name's Molly in 2020. She's got to go back through 8 generations of strong black women to find her voice, to find herself. So wow. I'm very excited. I've got the outlines, and I've got to hand it in on the 31st of May. And that's just what it is. It's a pitch document. So once we have that pitch document, then we can go and pitch the idea to all the streamers and broadcasters, and we might do a co-pro production as well. So that's when Bain steps up, and he takes. So it's like I make the Cleverman. We got our Cleverman, and I'm putting in whatever I need. Them gum leaves and a bit of emu feathers and a bit of lily pilly or something, and then I hand it over to him, and then he takes it out and sells the products and get people to believe in the work, and then we get that bungu, and then we can employ mob. This is the great thing, because majority of it, there's a lead Indigenous woman, First Nations, there's a lead is the female, then there's a First Nations support lead role, and then there's a whole big family and community. So that's what's exciting too. We get to employ mob, and hopefully there's technicians there to come on and work in that aspect of behind the scenes as well. Would be awesome.
I think it's so good that you mentioned it, because the whole world is going through a skill shortage, staff shortage, right, at the moment. So we need to start thinking about, especially, I know AACTA, I don't think it's being funded anymore, or it's fallen down. I'm not too sure, but I did hear a conversation. So if our own, Aboriginal performing arts, schools are not existing anymore, not operating anymore. Where do our mob go? So these are really important conversations for people in the arts to start thinking about, like Queensland Theatre Company. How are you growing the talent, this younger generation? When you look at the fact that we're 3% of the population and half of our population are children, like 50% of our population are under the age of 25 arts. And there are a lot of young people that are going to be coming through the ranks soon. And there's so many young people at university. I think it's the most university enrolments at QUT, Griffith University, UQ, I know probably in Sydney as well, than ever before. So how do we make sure that that pipeline of talent, not everyone's going to be on stage and not everyone wants to be in front of the camera, but there's so many other positions, like you said, behind the camera for our mob. So hopefully people watching this now start to think, all right, there's a skill shortage and there's going to be opportunities to work with people like you, which is going to be amazing. And there's probably not many, black film productions in the country, probably just a few or maybe even a handful. So we need to make sure that our mob, who are, when you think about it, the oldest storytellers on the planet, we've got to make sure that we're, making sure that those opportunities or pathways are available. Because not always will our mob succeed in those white-fella organisations or these big film production companies, our mob might not feel, comfortable or in those environments. So we need to make sure that our mob are working in organisations or companies where they are feeling, that sense of, connected and supported and that they belong.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, it's like this next generation, they blow me away, of mob. They're just so deadly, they're smart, they're savvy, they got it going on. And I think, to know that there's been the biggest enrolments in the universities around the country is music. Our ancestors would be dancing because this is what they want, to achieve. We've got to be hungry to achieve, because all of us will bring our mob with us. See, that's the thing with us, mob. When we achieve, it's everyone's success. So we need to be encouraging on many levels, not just the footballers, not just the actors. We need the people at the grassroots, of organisations. We need to make sure that, organisations as yourself is on the board of Queensland Theatre Company. Is that what you're on?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and to have a black representative in there to be pushing the agenda of how do we employ, how do we make this place feel safe for mob to come and to, like me, ask those dumb questions where we're all frightened to be shamed, but have another black face there where we can go, hey, which way, and I swear by it, to make that. So it is. And
I can, yeah.
It's an awesome time. We have to capitalise.
Of course, I was just going to say they are the conversations that we are having at a board level. They are the conversations about how do we grow our workforce and also make sure that there's budget there to employ our mob, not just in the admin or trainee roles, but in all roles across, film. I was going to say film here, my English, across film and the theatre and the arts more broadly. And it's really deadly to know that we've got, our deadly Quandamooka woman, who's basically the Minister for the Arts, Leanne Enoch. So having someone like her at the forefront when you think about policy and government funding, to have someone like her making sure that there is a policy and there is funding available, then we've got that in terms of we can't fail, we can't not do what's been mandated from the top down. So it's really good to have her support and her. She's always making sure, she'll ring me every now and again and ask me, how's everything going? And I'm the first one to tell her, these mob are right. We're going to take a bit more longer to get there in terms of building relationships and getting out. Because Queensland is a really big state. And also, we're in this unique position in Queensland because we've got both Indigenous cultures. So we've got to make sure that the stories are being collected and told by both Aboriginal and Torres Strait mob. And I really wanted to say a big shout out because I've been studying this week, doing my Masters of Business in Indigenous Business Leadership with the Monash University mob. And Katrina Muhammad, or she was a Muhammad, now Katrina Johnson, a deadly sister that's flown over from the United States to be in class in Melbourne. I'm not on campus this week. I've been at home with my babies. But Katrina, when I said to her, sis, I know we've got an assignment due tomorrow, but I need to go and do this recording with Auntie Leah. She said, oh, make sure you tell her that we're all very proud of her and how deadly she is. So big shout out and big loves from the Monash Uni mob who's supporting you. But also in terms of just our community, you know, you've an absolute inspiration. And, you know, I hate using the word role model because sometimes role model, you know, there's a lot of pressure and responsibility that comes with the word role model. But in terms of you being able to contribute what you have, not just to our community, but to this country as a whole, I just wanted to say thank you. And I know I've got to wrap up the yarn, but I want to say, if there was one thing that you could leave our listeners, right, with, what would it be? If it's something to do with the film, or if you want to target young people, or you want to target mainstream Australians or prepare them for the film, I'm going to leave that one with you.
Well, there's a couple of things I always like to give to the young people. Have a dream. Doesn't matter how outrageous it is, because when I told people when I was a 9-year-old girl that I wanted to act like Doris Day, Liza Minnelli and Barbara Streisand, people laughed, you know, and have a dream, because I think a lot of our young people don't, you know. So keep dreaming, because, you know, you might get all the way there or you might get halfway, but as long as you get somewhere in life. And I tell people, you have to be proactive. Don't rely on anyone else, family included. Love them, but you have to be in charge of your destiny. In regards to the film, I hope all Australians and people around the world get behind The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson. I worked hard on it. And Bain worked hard on it. Everyone worked hard on it. I think it's a special film in the sense that I want to bring about debate and conversation in our country. I want us to look back on our past as blackfellas and find the power in where we've come from. Yes, there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of trauma, but we have survived. We continue to survive. There's a reason for that. And I hope that non-Indigenous Indigenous people will it'll make them just consider. And I hope that they have conversations and talk about the issues that are raised and maybe bring about a bit of awareness. But at the end of the day, also, I hope that they think that they spend their money wisely, and it's a good drama as well. You know, it is a content warning to all the Indigenous mob out there. But everyone who knows my work should know that I'm not afraid to tell the truth, and it'll drive us and we'll be all crying. But it's also releasing, you know, as well. And I just want to say to you and your sisters, your mother and father will be so proud of what you all have done as well, you know, and it's just great to see black magic women out there all over, you know, in various positions in the world. Some of them are the best mothers, and that's the hardest job in the world, to people sitting on boards, to CEOs in companies, running Minister of the Arts, you know what I mean? But as long as we back one another, support one another, even if sometimes we disagree with one another, that's okay. But let's not pull each other down. Just keep the praise and rise up.
Oh, what an amazing way to actually wrap up our yarn. I just want to say, I know that this film's going to be a huge success, because I am making sure personally that every single person that has done black card training, every single corporate, every single partner and relationship that I've built over the last 9 years of running our business, they are hearing about The Drover's Wife every single day in every single workshop and every single yarn I'm having, even in meetings like with the Philanthropy Australia. Before they all got off the Zoom, I had to say, hold a minute, just one more thing. I really want people to go out and watch the film, but I really want people to start having these conversations, because it's exhausting for us as black fellas to be doing the heavy lifting.
That's right.
We make up 3% of the population, and we need the 97% of the population to support us in doing some of the heavy lifting when it comes to the history of this country. So Art, thank you so much. And I know you're a busy woman, so just an hour of your time, I just want to say thank you. It's not just an hour. I know that there's a lot that's been asked of you in terms of all these screenings and flying here, Zooming here, talking to these people. But to make time for this podcast, I am very, very thankful. So thank you.
No, thank you.
How amazing and inspirational is Auntie Leah Purcell, AM, and I'm going to just now share a little bit about art, because as black fellas, you know, like not only don't we have enough time to talk about all the things that we've achieved, but it's also part of our culture that you're brought up to be humble, not to big note yourself. So I'm going to do some big noting now for Art. So Art is a multi-award-winning director, actor, writer, producer and showrunner. She has written and directed landmark film, TV and theatrical works such as Box the Pony. You would have seen her in Redfern Now, Cleverman, The Secret Daughter, My Life is Murder, The 12 and The Drover's Wife. She is an actor, Helpmann, The Deadlies, Australian Directors Guild, AWGIE, AFI, Matilda and Logie award-winning and nominated artist for her outstanding work on iconic feature film, TV and theatre such as Lantana, Jindabyne and The Proposition, Police Rescue, which she mentioned, Janet King, and she plays Rita in Wentworth, as well as Box the Pony, The Story of the Miracles at Cookie's Table, and of course The Drover's Wife. Her writing has been recognised with the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards, a Queensland Premier's Literary Award, and the Victorian Prize for Literature. In 2017, she received the Sydney UNESCO City of Film Award, and in 2021 was made a member of the Order Australia for significant service to the performing arts, to First Nations youth and culture and to women. Most recently, she was the 2021 winner of the Asia Pacific Screen Awards Jury Grand Prize for her multifaceted role in her directorial debut, writer, producer and lead actor of the feature film The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson. Currently, Art is starring opposite Sigourney Weaver in Amazon Originals' The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, produced by Bruna Papandrea and Made Up Stories, and in development on the premium limited series based on The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson novel and film. I know that there's a lot there, and I'm sure there is much more to talk about, but like we talked about in our yarn, The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson is now in cinemas across this country and soon will be in the United States and across the UK. Go out and watch it or buy the book, have conversations, and hopefully, like I said, you know, the rest of the country can help us as First Nations peoples in terms of the heavy lifting when it comes to understanding and also owning our history in this country. So I hope you've enjoyed this yarn. Until next time, bye for now.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.